spring of 2023, I walked one of the world's finest long-distance trails, through some of the most remote and beautiful glens, through the endless bog, along the stunning Scottish west coast, and over very rough, pathless country. This is the story of the UK's hardest and roughest long-distance route, the Cape Wrath Trail. The Cape Wrath Trail is a route of somewhere between 350 and 400 kilometers. The trail runs along the northwest coast of Scotland to the most northwesterly point of Britain's mainland, Cape Wrath. The Cape Wrath Trail is not a set path. In truth, there's often no path at all. The trail is more of an idea, a bundle of countless route alternatives between Fort William in the south and Cape Wrath in the north. It took me 17 days to complete my version of the Cape Wrath Trail, totaling 400 kilometers, finally reaching the lighthouse on the Cape. This documentary tells the story of that journey of endless views over glens, wet feet for days on end, the lovely people I met on the trail, and stunning camping spots in the Scottish wilderness. In Fort William, I took the ferry to the other side of the lake to reach the trailhead. Starting a new trail always makes me a bit nervous, and this challenging Cape Wrath Trail had me a little extra on edge. The trail's difficulties include navigating pathless terrain, remote areas with no cell phone coverage, dealing with wet and sometimes tricky terrain, especially in fall weather. There are also rivers and streams to cross, which can be quite a challenge, especially during high water. The path on the first section leading onto the Kona Glen estate had good tracks, and I would manage to keep my feet dry until the next day. The light rain on my first day and night would be one of the few rainy moments on the trail for me, which made the challenging Cape Wrath Trail a lot more enjoyable. Even though the weather was favorable, the tracks, or countless pathless sections, passed through a lot of boggy areas. Bog, or saturated wet marshland, is probably the best single word to describe the underfoot of the Cape Wrath Trail. All challenges aside, after a good first night in the wild Kona Glen, surrounded by herds of deer, I was genuinely looking forward to the adventures that laid ahead. After passing the famous Glenfinnan viaduct, the trail becomes increasingly remote as it enters the rugged terrain of Knoydart. This section of the trail is known for its isolation and physical demands. In my opinion, this might be the finest section of the trail. Just crossing the summit over the first pass, we, a couple of hikers moving at the same pace, encountered an injured hiker with a broken ankle. Together we used our satellite safety beacons to call in the mountain rescue. While waiting for the mountain rescue, I met fellow Dutch hikers Elmar and Nina and reconnected with Joe and Will, whom I just met at Glenfinnan. Over the next few days, our paths would intersect intermittently. The terrain from the accident site onwards was exceedingly rugged, traversing pathless marshlands. With our feet completely soaked, we hastily set up our tents on a dry spot at the valley's end as darkness descended. On the third day, I set my sights on the Sourleys bothy, a free-to-use mountain hut of which there are many along the trail. While I typically camp anyways, having a bothy nearby is great for shelter from bad weather, and there are always flat camping spots around them. The journey to Sourleys bothy proved to be one of the wettest sections of the trail, but so very beautiful and rugged too. The Sourleys bothy lies very remote at the end of a sea loch, with the tide sometimes blocking the trail. Even though it's so remote, there were quite a few hikers. It wasn't something I had anticipated in such an isolated location, but it proved a pleasant opportunity to meet and chat with fellow hikers. It's remarkable how every hike I get to meet incredible people, which are all so different but also like-minded hiking enthusiasts. For me, these encounters make walking long distance trails even more worthwhile. After leaving the rugged Noidart area, I spent the night at the Morvik campsite. Here I picked up a resupply parcel I had sent ahead and made use of the campsite amenities to take a long warm shower and wash my muddy clothes. After this little taste of civilization, I continued my journey with renewed energy. Shortly after leaving Morvik, you come across the intimidating falls of Glomag, with the path running perilously close to a 100-meter deep ravine. If you're uneasy about heights like me, this section of the trail can be quite nerve-wracking. I later heard that just a week after I had passed through, a fellow hiker took a tumble into the ravine. He ended up stuck down there, injured until he was rescued the next day. Hearing stories like these from other hikers really make you realize you can't afford to let your guard down on the tricky sections of the trail. If you have doubts or encounter fall weather, I highly recommend taking the detour, bypassing the falls. Beyond the falls, the trail becomes quite remote. That evening I planned to camp at Malbuth, whose Gaelic pronunciation I'm likely butchering, like most Gaelic names. Here I was reunited with Elmar and Nina, and together we enjoyed our dinner while admiring a breathtaking sunset. The following day I said goodbye to them, as they were almost finishing their partial hike of the Cape Wrath Trail. As I walked into Crag, finding a suitable place to pitch with darkness approaching proved challenging. The Ashna Shellach campsite turned out to be a fantastic choice. At the campsite I enjoyed the warmth and comfort of a charming little barn where I was joined by 3 fellow hikers, Sarah and David, delightful Brits, and the courageous solo hiker Letizia. Setting off for a short day to Kinloch, the gathering from the previous night had boosted my spirit. The No Frills campsite, complete with a barn with intriguing curiosities, offered us the essential comforts: a cozy couch, cold running water and a toilet. I had rekindled that familiar hiking sensation, realizing that having all your essentials into a single backpack is a luxury in its own right. Even more luxurious was the company of fellow hikers who shared the same adventurous and crazy idea to hike across the Highlands. After being confronted with some menacing skies and navigating a pathless ascent, the route towards Cheneval improved with the welcoming arrival of the sun. Truth be told, long days in the wilderness can be mentally challenging, but as with every long distance hike so far, the connection with nature after being out for so long is a very soothing experience. Having started my day early, I reached my planned camping spot just after midday. Given the fantastic weather, I decided to take advantage of it and extend my hike by a few extra kilometers. Upon reaching the next valley, I encountered limited camping options, leading me to make the bold decision to cross yet another pass, resulting in a lengthy 43-kilometer day before finally reaching Inverleil. This little hamlet was around the halfway point of my trek. I booked a delightful stay at the Glachan Garden Bed and Breakfast. Here I enjoyed a well-deserved rest day and the host's culinary talents, preparing myself for what was to come on the second half of the trail. I slept at my first and only Scottish bothy on this hike just before Oigle Bridge. The first stone bothy I encountered was chilly and moldy, so I opted for the second bothy I passed, a converted schoolhouse. The wooden bothy was nice and cozy and also kept my tent dry as it rained through the night. The route to Inchnedamp was wet yet stunning, and the landscape expanded as I was getting closer to the coast. The Inchnedamp Explorers Lodge served as a welcome rest stop, offering not only a much needed shower, but also reuniting me with familiar faces from the trail. The trail beyond Inchnedamp offered breathtaking views of different rivers and lochs at various elevations. A few raindrops fell in the morning, but the threatening sky complemented the landscape. Even though I had managed to keep myself mostly dry on this hike for so long, rain began pouring towards the end of the day. Descending in the rain proved challenging as the path turned into ankle-deep streams, while the streams themselves turned into raging rivers. Fortunately, there were no streams to ford, and the Glen du Bothy was only a 2-hour walk away, offering shelter and great company. As James tended to the evening fire, we all gathered around the fireplace for dinner. The following day was a short one. We discovered that Cape Wrath, situated within the Ministry of Defence firing range, wouldn't be accessible due to our pace coinciding with the firing day. So James, Steph, David and Sarah all slowed down and savoured the last few days. We pitched our tents early on the shores of Loch Stack, enjoying the beautiful sunny views and spectacular clouds. The next day I intentionally kept my hike even shorter to give Joe and Will a chance to catch up. While the distance to Reconnick was not far, the path was challenging, winding through trackless heather and waist-deep bogs. It took me hours to cover just a few kilometers. That evening I was joined by Joe and Will, and we enjoyed dinner overlooking the sea log and a stunning sunset. With just 2 days away from reaching the Cape, we had a relaxing day ahead of us with some road walking through Kinlochbervie. We enjoyed a delicious cooked breakfast at the old schoolhouse and took a shopping tour along the small shops in town, allowing us to stock up on some treats to celebrate our nearing finish. The Cape Wrath Trail had been an amazing trip through some of the wildest terrain I've ever hiked. I can easily see the daunting challenge of navigating the Cape Wrath Trail in unfavorable conditions. In any event, the often elusive paths are a real challenge, and it's clear to me why this trail is known as the toughest and most rugged in the UK. Our final night on the trail would be spent at the beautiful Sandwood Bay, a picturesque spot with a pristine white sand beach. We found a beautiful camping spot beside the loch a bit further inland. With just 12 kilometers left to the lighthouse, we felt at ease celebrating our impending finish. On the beach, we savoured the snacks we had purchased in town and uncorked a bottle of champagne. It was great to celebrate the incredible journey the Cape Wrath Trail had been so far, in the company of Joe and Will, who I had the fortune of meeting on this trip. There's nothing quite like enjoying a chicken curry while sipping champagne from a jet boil pan and gazing out at the sea. The final day began early, marked by harsh Scottish weather, strong winds and heavy rain. I ate my breakfast in my tent, and Joe, Will and I quickly packed up our tents and set off for our last few hours to the lighthouse. The final leg of the Cape Wrath Trail was challenging, characterized by boggy, trackless and wet terrain made even more difficult by the persistent rain, forcing me to keep my camera stowed in my pack. Midway, we entered the Ministry of Defence firing range, indicated by the flying red flags signifying restricted access. Thankfully, we had confirmed firing times with range control and could safely enter. During these last hours on the trail, I reflected on my journey. For me, the solitude of the Highlands, the quiet and peaceful hiking days, allowing for moments of pure serenity, make hiking so exceptionally rewarding. I also had the privilege of crossing paths with wonderful people, adding unforgettable memories to this expedition. After covering 400 kilometers and 17 days on foot, we finally arrived at the lighthouse on the northwestern tip of Britain's mainland. As we removed our backpacks and boarded a minibus back to civilization, our Cape Wrath Trail journey had come to an end.